Welcome to Put a Word on It, a podcast presented by Men of Valor. In each episode, we're going to talk with a different man, but each one with a unique journey from brokenness to freedom. I'm your host, Rudy Kalis. I spent over 40 years as a TV sportscaster, then retired and joined the Men of Valor program as a volunteer, so join the conversation. Reconciling men to God, their families, and society. Welcome to another edition of Put a Word on It, brought to you by Core Civic. We thank them so much for all of their support through all the years. There are a lot of staff members here. There are also a lot of people that are volunteers and board members. Sometimes you say to yourself, wait a minute, I've never been incarcerated. What do I know? What can I do to make a difference in somebody's life? But every one of us, God uses in a way to prepare them with things in their past. I want you to meet one of those board members with a really interesting story, how he learned, how he can relate to these men in prison. And the man I want you to meet is Dustin Greene. I'm always fascinated how God takes people on a tour of the country sometimes to bring them here to be used in the Men of Valor program. And you're telling me you've lived where? All over?
Lived, of course, in the Carolinas, and then, really South Georgia, and then Atlanta. Moved to Texas, came to Nashville, or Brentwood specifically, in 1993. So all over the Southeast and also Texas.
But let's see, when you came here to Nashville, was it work related?
My dad was actually a hospital executive. He came here for work. I was actually then a sophomore in high school. So been a long time ago.
Wow.
You got it.
Were you a good kid growing up?
I was a good kid growing up. Yeah, I was a kid, of course, always involved in church Sunday and Wednesday nights, and I was on the straight and narrow for a long time, for the most part.
You're not the kind of guy that we think can relate to inmates.
I got plenty of issues, Rudy. Trust me, plenty of. We're all broken, me especially.
Give me an idea of things that you struggle with that you can relate to these guys.
It's funny. In my first breakfast for Men of Valor, I was personally impacted because the visual of these men that have a rap sheet to me is an incredible image of redemption. But what I was struck most by, Rudy, is there are a lot of men in that room who were in their own prison. Maybe in a suit and tie, look the part and sound the part, but have their own battles and struggles that are every bit as challenging as the men inside the four walls of a prison. And so, we are all broken, all need redemption. For me personally, young guy, very professionally focused early in my career, having a job, having a career, having success is not a bad thing, but it's also not a calling. And so for me, having an idol, I think professionally and success for me, huge risk throughout my life.
You were in the healthcare industry for a long period of time. In that, the addiction and things that you really relate to, and that's a huge problem in the prisons. You got a background in that, didn't you?
I sure did. Of course, right now, all across the nation, our emergency departments are full of patients that have incredible addiction issues and challenges. Knows no boundaries. Socioeconomically, addiction is everywhere. And the impact not just to the person that has the addiction, but their loved ones and their family. And the kind of the extension of the disease is just incredible. Also in that space, Rudy, of course, for most illnesses or for most injuries, if you're sick, you get treated and you get better. But specifically in addiction, most frequently, it's circular, and it goes around and around and around and again and again and again. Actually defeating this is incredibly challenging. They say that if you're out in the wilderness and you get lost and you begin to wander, you actually almost always go in a circle and wind up back where you began. In addiction, it's the exact same thing. And if you don't have true healing and a true hope through Christ, it's probably going to happen again. And the suffering that happens in this space is absolutely incredible.
Why are there so many people? Why is there so much addiction? Is there so much depression in the world?
That's a great question. I think it's becoming easier to get your hands on it. I think also sometimes what happens is in the hospital setting, if you're hurting, you usually get a pain pill. If you go to the ER and you have back pain, you get a pain pill. So first to me, is the hospitals have to do a better job of not over-medicating people. That clearly is a part of this. I think it's depression. I think it's ease of access. It's the hospitals as well.
You're right. I've had enough surgeries of hip replacement such where I get oxycodone prescribed. I'm not going to take it. I don't even go to pick it up, but it becomes a simple thing to try to get. Now you take somebody that is mentally frustrated with all of life, has been raised in abusive background, gets involved in addiction and then crime to try to fulfill that thing.
Yeah.
And you've got some guys that are some lost souls, don't you?
You sure do. Dear friend of mine, actually a local guy in Brentwood, incredible athlete, baseball player, had a 100-mile-an-hour fastball in high school. Went to University of Alabama on a full ride. Incredible pitcher. Had an arm injury, had surgery, got medicated as a result. Obviously got addicted, and the rest is history. But been through an incredible cycle. It's gone on for decades now. The probability of addiction, your third day on a narcotic increases your probability of addiction by 80%. And so it's about how do you treat pain in an appropriate but also a very conservative way. Yeah, huge challenge.
How were you approached to consider Men of Valor, and why did you say yes?
Yeah, again, of course, there at the breakfast was there, of course, years ago at the breakfast, many years ago. Came one time as a guest, had an incredible personal impact. Walked out of there inspired. Came again the next year and the next year. Of course, then after that, had my own table. And you get pulled and invited into a lot of nonprofits, and some you just kind of go because you have to. I felt a personal calling to this. The visual image of redemption to me is as crystal clear in this ministry as any I've seen. And to be a part of rescuing men and their families back to Christ, to be a part of that, to me is absolutely incredible.
Is there any party that says, man, how can I relate to these guys? What kind of a cred have I got to talk to guys that have gone through these tough lives and this incarceration? How do you handle that?
It's funny. I was sharing before that I literally sit every year and think to myself that this entire auditorium packed full of men in suits that look the part. I know a lot of them are hurting, have their own battles. And you can think, well, I'm back here in a suit and tie, and here's a man who's been in prison. We are all the same, and we're all broken people. And anyone who thinks that they're above the person that's been behind the four walls is as lost as anybody I've ever seen. Again, our souls all need redemption.
We need men to come into the program. A lot of them are afraid. It's like I ask you, they say, I don't know what I can offer. What can you tell them?
Any relationship that is grounded in the right things is going to be meaningful and impactful, not for one person, but actually for both people.
But you really have found, to me, in my now 5.5 years, you got to be real. They hold you accountable. It literally changes you as a person, doesn't it?
Yep, it sure does. I completely agree. It's funny. In my time in the hospital setting, again, had over 20 years in HCA, 10 years as a hospital CEO. My most memorable moments aren't the deal or the new surgeon that came on board or the new building. It was about someone that worked in the kitchen or in housekeeping that I began to get to know on a personal level, and had a connection that was real and sincere, knew about them and their families and their hurt and their struggles. The way that they loved me in return, it was immeasurable. It's always about relationships every single time.
Friends that you have, people that you meet, you tell them you're involved in a prison ministry. What do they look at and say to you?
That they have questions. They're like, are these guys still in prison? Are you safe? What's going on? But again, the realization that all of us are in our own prison, only released by one true hope and one true joy.
That really has driven home to you the fact that all of us have these issues. Some of us just weren't caught in whatever the situation is.
Absolutely.
You're an adventurous guy. I think this was probably an adventure. You told me you're going for your private pilot's license as well.
Yep. I have wanted to fly my entire life. Of course, had some young kids for a while. Then my wife said, you can't fly yet, but now they're older. I can fly now. But yeah, I'm going to have my license now in about a month or so, pretty close to having it complete. If you're in the air and you're behind the pilot's controls, can't worry about your phone, can't worry about what happened an hour ago or yesterday. All you can do is fly the airplane. For me, it's incredibly freeing,
Ever get up there and get in the clouds, and this is just this little bit of space between me and heaven?
Absolutely.
It's a joy. So. The name of our program is Put a Word on It. Have you given it some thought?
I sure have. My word is joy. Happiness is circumstantial, but joy it is based on one true joy that can only be found in the hope of Christ. And I tell you, it's a lot better than happiness.
I really like that because it makes me think of the verse in the Bible where it says, in the morning will come joy. So you can go through difficulties, but the joy from God in that respect. You've lived a full life. You've got a son that's going off to college. You're going to boo-hoo about that?
Have a daughter now who's actually a sophomore at Clemson.
Oh,
of course,
okay.
our son has a school next Wednesday up in Pennsylvania. One more at home, and I'm 44, Rudy. The years have gone by fast. It's crazy, absolutely crazy.
Hang on, they go faster the older you get.
That's what I hear. That's what I hear.
I love your spirit. I love your determination. You mean so much to the program, Dustin.
Thank you. You're very, very kind. Thank you so much.
Well, let me put a word on it. Joy is such a very simple word, but I love the fact that he just puts that out there. And he has that about himself, all the things that he's learned. For me, the education that he had about prescription drugs and how these things lead into people. Man, there's a lot of guys incarcerated that went through that process and have had to battle that all their lives. He's a perfect man for this position on the board. We wish him the best, even though his son is going off to play football and he's not going to be at home, but his daughter's in college. It's part of life. He'll handle it beautifully. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next time as we put a word on it.